Welcome to ICN Sunday Morning. I'm Vernon Loeb, Executive Editor. Environmentalists have been fighting for over a decade to get PFAS, the forever chemicals, out of the water in the Cape Fear River in eastern North Carolina. Finally, last year, they scored a big victory, only to have Donald Trump return to the White House this year and announce that he plans on rescinding the water quality standards they fought so long and hard for. And so the fight is on again. Joining me this morning to talk about what we're calling the forever war is a remarkable journalist, our North Carolina reporter, Lisa Sorg. So Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
So part one of your new series called The Forever War is debuting on our site this morning. I hope everybody reads it. It's a really good piece. You're something of a forever warrior yourself. You've been covering the PFAS wars along the Cape Fear River for how many years?
I began covering PFAS on June 15th, 2017. So that's more than 8 years ago. And it's been a very interesting and circuitous issue to follow through the courts and the legislature. And there's just been a lot of very moving personal stories as well.
Yeah. I guess I really had no appreciation before I started editing your story about how pervasive the PFAS contamination is in this eastern sector of the state.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, it's in private drinking water wells, it's in the air, it's in public water systems, and a lot of that is because they don't go away, these chemicals. That's why they're called forever chemicals. So they seep into the groundwater, they get into drinking water wells, they go through stacks, smokestacks, and then they end up on the earth, or they seep into the Cape Fear River. And it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole to possibly remove them.
Yeah, yeah. And so what was the big victory that these environmentalists who you're writing about, who are your main characters, what's the big victory they won in April of 2024?
Yes, I remember that day well. It was the day that EPA Administrator, then Michael Regan, announced the legally enforceable limits on several types of PFAS compounds, including Gen X, which is a big one in that part of the state, comes directly from Comores. And it was like a family reunion of sorts. I mean, Regan was, reuniting with some of his DEQ officials. There were environmental advocates there. There were state lawmakers who had all been involved in trying to get the EPA to enact these drinking water standards, and it had finally happened. So it was very celebratory.
Right, and Regan, we should point out, had been the top environmental regulator in North Carolina before Biden tapped him to run the EPA.
That's correct. And so he had only been on the job maybe 6 months when the crisis emerged. So it was baptism by fire for him regarding Gen X and PFAS in the drinking water during his DEQ tenure.
Yeah, yeah. And so he leaves North Carolina, he becomes the EPA administrator. This long fight goes on in North Carolina year after year until last year. He puts these standards into place, and then Trump comes in, and what happens?
Well, first, the new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, delayed the compliance date for two types of PFAS, and it's PFOS and PFOA, which are legacy compounds. They're not even made in the US anymore. It was, and I don't know why he delayed the compliance date until 2031. That would be by 2 years. But there were some utilities who were worried they weren't going to be able to make the deadline. So that was one thing that he did. But it's worth saying that some utilities are still going ahead and intend on meeting the original deadline of 2029. Durham, North Carolina, one of them, they're going to spend $15 million to remove PFAS from our drinking water. And they said, we are going to comply with the original deadline. So that was one, less offensive than the advocates would say than the second one, which was to roll back the Gen X regs and for a few others. And that was a big blow because that's not just delaying, that's getting rid of them altogether.
Yeah. And so this is sort of where your story begins, and you describe your main character, a woman named Emily Donovan, as being devastated and enraged. So set the scene for us. Where is she when she's thinking, feeling this way, and what has just happened?
Wow. So it was a very interesting case in contrast, because I remember being at Ocean View United Methodist Church this afternoon in May. It was mid-May. It was a beautiful day, sunny, perfect beach day, and breezy. Oh, it was amazing. And so we go into the church, and she's going to introduce a scientist who had some pretty sobering news about PFAS and seafoam. But then, before she even gets to that part, she has to tell the crowd Zeldin is going to, has signals his intent to roll back these drinking water standards. And I remember she says, our hard work is being undone. We've worked so hard. And I could just tell by the tension in her face that she really, in one sense, felt deflated, but in another, emboldened. And I think at the time, a lot of people on that day were trying to make sense about how they felt about it and what the new strategy was going to be to try to fend this rollback off.
Yeah, yeah. And you described her as devastated and enraged.
She definitely was.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, they had come to this church to get the results from a study of sea foam that she had actually kind of discovered walking along the beach there. And I think you described it at one point in your piece as looking like Ready Whip. It's not just the brown, foamy, normal sort of sea foam, but it's this thick, goopy, white, chemical-laced foam that they then gathered from multiple places and studied. And so what did they find in the sea foam in this part of North Carolina?
Well, the NC State scientists found astronomical levels of PFAS in sea foam. And when I say astronomical, like 8 million parts per trillion, which is off the charts. It's less so in ocean water because of the dilution, but PFAS tend to accumulate in the foam. And the reason that's important is people play in the foam. They don't know that it's tainted. You might have your dogs on the beach, they've got their snouts in it, or you have your kids who are, thinking it's like bath foam, when actually it's very bad for you. And it's just, sometimes it has sand in it, so it might look a little browner, but it often sticks to the shore. There's just something unsettling about it. And subsequently, the state came out and said, don't touch it, don't go near it. Even it might be benign, but we don't know.
Yeah, and just for background's sake, these chemicals are made by Chemours, a chemical company that has a plant in Fayetteville, North Carolina, on the Cape Fear River. These chemicals are made for stuff like stick-resistant pots and pans and waterproof vests and firefighting.
Yes.
That's this class of chemicals.
Right. And they are now, wanting to expand because they say that these chemicals are also important in, medical devices. There are actually heart valves, artificial heart valves out there that have PFAS in them. And there's a lot of consternation about that. There's something that scientists will say is a regrettable substitute, which means certain kinds of PFAS are replacing older types, but they're just as bad, if not worse. So,
yeah.
I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah, actually, I've also just learned this. There's a lot of PFAS in data centers. The PFAS is used as a coolant in data centers, and now data centers are being built everywhere to power AI. So it just seems like the more ubiquitous this stuff becomes in the water, the more ubiquitous it becomes in the industrial process and in our uses of it.
Yes, and it has very serious health effects. It has been associated. I don't want to, go so far as to say it's causation, but it has been associated, and comes from EPA toxicologists and other independent toxicologists, with a variety of health issues, thyroid disorders, kidney cancer, testicular cancer. So there was just a study that came out that said chemotherapy treatments for ovarian cancer are less effective in people with high levels of PFAS in their blood. So they're learning all sorts of new things every day about the toxicity of these compounds, and yet they're everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So back to the forever war. So what are the odds that the environmentalists can fight off this latest Trump court challenge on these water standards and keep them in place, or is this something they're gonna lose um, to Trump?
Yeah, well, whether the Gen X rollbacks actually occur is going to hinge on several factors. One, public comment. The draft rules will have to go out to public comment. The chemical industry's influence, which is substantial. The skill of the lawyers on both sides, and the integrity of the courts. And that is something that, we should not take for granted. So I think over the next 6-8 months, we're going to find out how this rolls out. I think one thing that's interesting is that the EPA is going to issue the draft rule this fall, and then they expect to have a final rule in the spring. And that's a very quick turnaround. That's less than 6 months. These can take a year or two or more, but this is on a fast track.
Right. And so your series is going to follow this. It's going to follow
Yes.
this plot line through the courts, but also through, did you tell me landfills? What's part two all about?
Oh, well, yeah, landfills. So it's very interesting because at one time, Chemours had to get rid of this Gen X waste somehow because they weren't allowed to put it in the river, and they do ship some of it to hazardous waste landfills or for deep well injection. But there have been occasions, according to public records, that Chemours has deposited this material in municipal landfills. This includes in Sampson County, which is the largest landfill in the state, and Robeson County, which is just south of Fayetteville. And both of these are in environmental justice communities. Robeson County is largely Lumbee Indian. So the issue in Robeson in particular is that the county wants to expand that landfill. And it appears that that landfill, the PFAS that have infiltrated that landfill, are now getting into the drinking water supply. So the Southern Environmental Law Center has successfully so far convinced the Robeson County officials to not decide on whether to expand the landfill or not. But that's a big problem because if they dig up the landfill, more, it's almost like a Pandora's box. So that will be coming to a head, I would say, in December. I've been following that, been going to the meetings. And so there's just a lot of moving parts right now. There are lawsuits, there are, like I said, landfills. We're finding now in biosolids and sludge and firefighting foam. So this series is entitled Forever War, and there's a reason for that, because it is a battle and it seems like it's going to go on forever.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you, how do you stay motivated to continue to kind of pour your heart and soul into this? And I know for you, reporting is very immersive. You crisscross the state in your Prius. You spend long hours with your sources at their kitchen tables going through documents. I mean, this is often almost like a 24-hour endeavor for you. So how do you keep at it?
Well, two things. One, the people inspire me. When I see people like Dana Sargent and Emily Donovan, and just, I've been to meetings where people were crying. At that church, for example, there was a woman at the end of the presentation who started to cry because she had astronomical levels of PFAS in her drinking water. And she, drunk that water all her life. Her children were now having issues. And so it just, I think, honing in on the personal stories keeps me motivated. And and then on another sense, I love rivers. There's a beauty of a river. The rivers have a right to be clean. I mean, there's an inherent goodness and nobility about a river. And so I care about the people and I care about the river, and that's why I get up every morning.
Okay, so with the war on again, we're often denounced as climate reporters for being ambassadors of doom and gloom, and to some extent we are, because we're covering a worldwide crisis. So give me something inspiring and hopeful to latch on to here as this war is revving up again to feel good about.
Well, there are very smart people, very motivated people, very passionate people who are doing this work. And so, You know, at one time, no one believed that there would ever be drinking water standards, and yet there were. So it's a long game, and I think that's what inspires me, is that there are so many people in for the long game, and I look to them to, buoy my spirits.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great note to end on. It's a long game. And you play the long game very well. So thank you so much for being here.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you for watching and for reading our work and supporting our work. We could not do this without you.